And we are back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Derek Haven, Steve Balestrieri. As always, we are both PatsFans.com bloggers. Today's episode, we're going to continue our pre-draft series as we do every year, basically just going through each position. Last week we talked about quarterbacks, running backs, receivers. Today we're doing tight ends, offensive line. Next week we're going to do the front seven. We got the secondary after that. So we're exciting. Same format as before, just to lay out a brief overview. We're going to basically talk about some day one prospects, day two, meaning rounds 2 and 3, and then day 3 and onward. And obviously each position, there's certainly, higher priorities than others. So we're going to kind of go through that whole process again, as we've done every year. Before we do anything at all, I want to say 2 things. For one, we are going to go ahead and have our preview, our prospect preview right now, and then later this week we're going to do just our regular show. But for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be continuing this whole pre-draft thing. And then, secondly, as we always do to start off the show, Steve, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
You can hear my daughter having a meltdown in the background.
Yes, so, I can, and
I apologize.
I'm sure you can hear my daughter snoring right underneath us. So
there's that.
So yeah, we have one that won't go to sleep, and we have one that is
constantly asleep.
Yeah,
so
23 hours a day.
That's it. That's it.
But yeah, no, it's good. There was some good news today for the Patriots. I don't know if you want to jump into that first, or we'll talk about it later.
Why don't you just jump into it right now when we just
okay? Christian Ellis, right? The Patriots have matched the offer for the Oakland Raiders. Christian Ellis is returning.
Las Vegas Raiders, but we know what you mean.
The Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, I know.
Old habits die hard. So.
I'm going to call them the San Diego Chargers till I die. So it
yeah,
doesn't matter to me. I know we're going to talk about some different, Patriots jumping off points. The Ellis thing's interesting because I was curious. I mean, we just talked about it before we pressed live. I didn't know what kind of carryover there was going to be. I knew that there were some similarities from defenses, but they are different. Bill, Gerard, Steve, they had the 2-gapping kind of read and react defense. Vrabel's more of an upfield, vertical penetrating defense. Some overlaying concepts, but to me specifically, I was wondering if Ellis would be one of those things that would kind of carry over. But I thought he played, even though he was kind of forced into an elevated role last year, I thought he still, I would say, outperformed what I was expecting for me personally. And I'm happy they're going to keep him around. I think that they've really shown some good depth at linebacker. I'm curious to see how it all shakes out once we get closer to the start of the season.
Yeah, I was curious how this was going to play out too, because, they just signed Jack Gibbons, who is kind of like Christian Ellis, right? So I was thinking, was this just insurance if Ellis, does go to the Raiders, or, were they looking to keep both, or were they looking to just let him walk? So I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good move. I thought Ellis played pretty well last year. Again, this is the first time he got extended work like that. But he's a good depth guy, and he's an excellent special teams guy, and good for him. He's going to make some money this year and next year, and
then we'll kind of go from there and see what kind of role he develops. And,
yeah,
I mean, we talked about this the other day, again, offline, and I don't want to dive too much into this because we can talk about this on Wednesday and later in the week when we do our regular show. But, I think there's a very real possibility. You and I have talked about this for 2 months now, that we thought that this roster was going to be turned over by 40 or 50%. And it's on track for that. Right now, it's going to be at least 33%. It's going to be a turnover. The linebacker core specifically is going to be totally interesting how they manage that, because I don't know if Jawan Bentley's a lock or not. I really don't. I mean, it makes sense that he would be on the team. I could also see them going in a totally different direction. And as I mentioned to you the other day when I was at the gym and we were just kind of shooting the stuff as we normally do, I think there's a possibility that Brendan Schooler's the only captain returning this year from last year. I think there's a total chance they flip everything because we're already seeing that kind of live in action. I mean, what's your take on that before we get to the tight ends and the offensive line?
Yeah, I wrote about this on Sunday and
Yeah,
my
that's
Sunday
why I kind of wanted to make you walk
yeah,
into that so people could check it out. But
yeah. I think there's a very good chance that either Jelani Tavai, Jawan Bentley, or possibly even both of them are gone this year. Now they need depth behind. I believe that Spillane is your starting middle linebacker. They didn't pay him $30 million to be a backup. So,
yep.
I think he's your starter, and they've made that clear because I read, I think it was Mike Giardi that wrote that Juwan Bentley has lost 20 pounds because he wants to fit in with the Vrabel, uh, speedier, more athletic, more aggressive guys.
Right.
And that tells me that he knows it's adapt or die, right? Basically, not die, but you know what I mean.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, you either adapt or you're hitting the bricks. So, that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out because I think right now he's not the starter. I mean, like I said, they didn't pay Spillane all that money to be a backup, and if they go with the 4-man front, you're only going 3 linebackers. That means, you don't have a pair inside. You only have the one. and I don't see either Juwan Bentley or Tavai being an outside linebacker.
No, so for me, I honestly, and I do want to, save some of this for Wednesday, but just because we're on the conversation to put a bow on it, I do think when you have more of a penetrating front, which is what they've kind of aligned themselves to. So say it's Harold Landry, Keon White, Milton Williams, Christian Barmore, assuming he's healthy, for his sake and for, our sake as fans, but for him as a human, of course, first and foremost. You have a penetrating front like that. Well, it makes sense that you want linebackers that can play downhill and play that run. So it's like a safety net, right? But Vrabel also likes guys who have a little bit more vertical range. That's why Mapu's kind of interesting. Does he fit into the plans? I'm not sure. Can you move some of these safeties around? I don't know. I feel like we won't really know the entire picture, Steve, until probably deeper into camp. But I am kind of curious to see how it fits. But to me, I guess part of this is because I wonder if Elliott Wolf has any influence on the roster. And I know that's kind of a weird transition, but I do think Vrabel ultimately has control. I know that Elliott said he did. And I'm not discrediting that he has some power. I do think Vrabel wouldn't have taken the job without feeling. I think they're working in conjunction with each other. I think they're good with it. I think that honestly, I don't think Vrabel would have been hired otherwise, whether Elliott was gone or he was not coming or whatever. But what I do wonder is if that Elliott looked at it and said, okay, this is your philosophy. This is what you want to do. Well, this guy is pretty cheap and we saw him ascending. So we'd like to go ahead and have him be in the mix. But I don't think that Vrabel would make that move for Ellis being on a 2-year deal if he didn't feel comfortable in projecting him in that role. So I wonder if it is a collective group or if there's more of a blend. Maybe I thought so. Maybe it's a me issue in my mind of philosophies and scheme and concepts for defense.
That's a good point. And we'll definitely revisit this on Wednesday. Excuse me, when we do our regular show. But
sure.
Yeah. I'm glad to see him back. Again, I thought, from what I expected when they brought him in, I thought he overachieved a little bit.
Oh, I do too. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's still a lot he can do better, obviously.
I'm not saying he was perfect by any means, but I think he at least excelled my expectations given the shit show, which was the whole last season. I thought that he was a little bit of a bright spot at times.
And he played hard whenever he was on the field.
Yeah, at least he looked like he gave a shit. Sorry, Miguel, but
Yeah, that's too. I mean, Miguel's going to boycott us here.
Oh God, I'm sorry. All right. But no, but seriously though, I did think there was at least it looked like he was kind of redlining a little bit for a team that really didn't have a whole lot to play for at certain points. But I'm excited to see what he has and curious about the overlap. So we'll get to that as we go ahead and talk about the combine stuff. We are within just a little over a month. From the time we say go for this whole thing. A lot of talk about the Patriots' first round pick. We've talked about different things. Going back to the beginning of the show, the precursor to these episodes, for example, quarterback last week, we talked about how they probably aren't in the market, certainly wouldn't be until, probably later in the draft. Running backs, we think they could be in the mix. Receivers, obviously heavily involved. But for these two positions, Steve, tight ends and offensive line, man, there's a lot to go ahead and discuss because, we have Hunter Henry on the roster. We have Austin Hooper on the roster, Jaheim Bell, in his last year. But I think tight end is a bigger need than most people are, I guess, talking about. And I think the only reason, Steve, for tight end specifically is because I think that there are so many other pressing needs that they kind of supersede the tight end position. But I think it's still critically important. And we've also seen Josh McDaniels and his offense in multiple different facets, multiple different ways that's been executed, use tight ends in different ways. And we know how important that is. So in your estimation for tight end, I think it's a little bit of kind of a sleeper pick, so to speak. I'm not saying I'd be surprised if they went like Tyler Warren from Penn State at 4, but would you be shocked if they took a tight end in round 2? I certainly wouldn't be.
No, because again, I mean, I thought Henry and Hooper last year were probably their two most reliable guys.
They're serviceable and they're consistent.
Yep. And they were always out there, and whether it was Jacoby Brissett or Drake May, they were always there for the quarterbacks. And when stuff broke down, they were the guys who made things happen more than other people. So, I mean, very glad that both of those guys are back, but they're both getting a little long in the tooth. Not saying they're old, but they're at that age where, you could start seeing, some decline there. And with such a loaded tight end class, they would be foolish not to at least, kick the tires on somebody, because, it doesn't mean the guy has to start on day one, but you would like to have him in the house and read up on the offense in case he's needed. And for the future, obviously.
Yep. And I to clarify, I don't think it's going to happen in round 2, but I think we've talked about it. I could see some kind of either combination of either a defensive lineman or edge player, a tight end, and a running back, kind of in those 3rd, 4th, 5th round range, because I feel like that's pretty deep overall. I think they can get some contributions. And there's a lot of guys in this class that I'm interested in. And I do think that it's important. And, there's a lot of guys that we like. So why don't we just start at the top? You can go whichever direction you want to, but why don't you start with one or two guys, and then I'll go ahead and go off it.
Yeah, I think, the top 2 guys on my list, I think, are going to be, if not first round, early second round.
Sure.
So I don't really feel like it's going to be either one of these guys. And that'd be Tyler Warren, who you just mentioned.
Yep.
Who I think is the top tight end in the class.
He's
and
awesome.
Colston Loveland from
Michigan.
From Michigan.
They're both good players. They really are. I think it's one of those things where if the Patriots were to trade down, let's say they got, I don't want to over exaggerate, but like, let's say they got a Godfather package for 3 or for 4, and they moved down 10 spots, and now they're talking about the middle of the first round. You could talk me into it 100%. Now I think there's more pressing needs. I think receiver, tackle, edge player. I mean, we could go through the list, but there are other positions that I would say are more important. But at the same time, almost every single NFL insider, and analysts have basically told you there's only a handful of blue chip prospects. It's not a heavy quarterback draft, and basically your guys at your third, fourth, fifth overall pick are going to have similar grades to the 20s. So if you're telling me the Patriots, who pretty much have two positions on their roster that I feel super strong about, which is quarterback and cornerback, one, okay, so they can pretty much take any position. So
Yeah.
if you're just telling me they just need to hit on a good pick, I'd
Yeah.
tell you Tyler Warren is a safe pick. I think he's he's one of the safest picks in the entire class.
I totally agree with that.
I'm not saying he's going to be
because
an all-star. I don't know, but I think he's going to be a player for a team, whoever takes him, basically.
I think he might not be
Gronk or Travis Kelce,
but I think he's going to be really good.
but if he's like Sam Laporta from for the Lions,
and
I think a lot of people would
he's
sign
really
up for that.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like Tyler Warren. I like Loveland too. I mean, I think those two guys.
And that wasn't a comp, by the way. I was just trying to
Yeah.
think of like a tight end that was like a very good player, and I'm like that to me is Warren and Loveland. I think both of them fall into that category.
Yeah, and I think Warren is a more complete tight end.
Yes, I agree.
And Loveland is just I think he's going to be a dynamic receiving tight end.
Sure.
He's not bad as a blocker, but that's, he's not going to light up the highlight film with his blocking. I mean, he's adequate, and that's about it. But I think, when it just comes to receiving, he's going to be a dynamic kind of guy. So that's why
in round two, who do you kind of like? Is there somebody you have your eye on? Because I think that, at 38, do I still think that's a little rich for tight end given the other needs? Yes. If I'm being 100% honest, I would say I'd be a little surprised. I wouldn't be totally shocked. I wouldn't rule it out. I just don't think first or second round is where the Patriots market's going to be for tight end. But I do think 2 is in the conversation, and I think 3 is absolutely on the table. Because again, I do think it's a bigger need than most think it is.
Yeah. If you're talking second round guy, Elijah Arroyo from Miami, and he's another guy. He's more of a move tight end,
which we've seen success with, within McDaniel's offense before.
Yes, I mean, also
from another school down in Florida.
Yeah, from who shall not be named. Yeah, but no, but if you want to mention it, he was a fantastic move tight end, and in Josh McDaniel's offense, he can make a guy like that work really well.
Yep.
And the other guy who I've been high on the entire draft, and I think he's going to be a late second round. He might even be earlier than that, but most of the mock drafts still have him around early on round 3. Mason Taylor. I love Mason Taylor.
We both do. We both like Mason Taylor a lot. And I think he's the kind of guy who, to me, makes more sense given the range they're going to end up picking. In a similar breath, they're very different, but in a similar breath, Gunnar Helm from Texas is a guy that I can see projecting into the offense the way that he operates the seam. Because to me, look, I mean, tight end's a hard position for a couple different reasons. We saw Bill talk about this at numerous different times. It's hard because you will have to know catching and receiving concepts, and you also have to know blocking concepts. So it is a lot on your plate. And we've seen guys that, have these things. I don't think the reason I don't. Well, it's a multifaceted issue, but there's 2 reasons why I think that tight end's not going to be super high on the priority list unless they just have a guy ranked really high that happens to fall into their lap, which obviously we wouldn't know. It's 2 things. For one, I just think they have more pressing needs. They have a lot of needs. We know that. But tight end's one of them. But I think they have more pressing needs at other positions. For 2, they have guys who are serviceable and consistent, like we talked about. So they have some time to buy. So if they take somebody who's maybe not ready to start day 1, even if he only gets a couple of snaps, per week, but let's say they can work him in. Okay, that's fine. To me, like, Arroyo, Helm, these guys can be moved around all over the formation. We know how good Drake May throws the ball across the middle, and we know how Josh likes to utilize those seam routes. So I think that can make a lot of sense for them. It's a fun class because I almost feel like it's a Baskin Robbins kind of class when it comes to tight end, running back, defensive line. It's not a great draft, but I think that there are certain positions where you can kind of get whatever flavor you want. Tight end absolutely falls into that category.
Yeah, and I mean, Helm is a walking meme on day one, right? Because
Yeah.
everyone's going to bust out. Who made that guy a gunner?
Yep.
That's just waiting to happen. But and then there's some other. I mean, there's so many good tight ends that I think in the middle rounds could still be had. Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame. Terrence Ferguson from Oregon.
And then the other one I like, and it's not just it's not just Ferguson, who I thought was interesting. We've seen Notre Dame produce pretty good tight ends in the past. Mitchell Evans is one of them. The other guy that caught my eye was Luke Lachey from Iowa, because Iowa has traditionally had pretty good tight ends come out of that program, and he's someone who's kind of a tough guy. And this is someone who, again, he's not going to be the prospect Tyler Warren is or Colston Loveland, but if you're telling me I can get this guy in the third, fourth round, and he can be a starter 2 years from now, I think we're having a conversation about it.
Yes, and again, you look at him, he looks like a tight end. If when you're looking up tight end in the dictionary, he looks the part. And like you said, from Iowa, they've done a great job of developing tight ends down there. He's a big kid, 6'6", 250. So
so if you had one guy, let's say you're on the clock as the Patriots. It's the third round. Patriots have already addressed somebody on the offensive line, somebody at a skill position. Which one? They're taking a tight end. If you think they're going to be on the board realistically in round 3, who's the card you're pulling up?
I would hope it's Taylor, but I think more likely it might be Helm.
I literally could not agree more. I totally agree with you.
I would hope it's Taylor, because I'm really high on that kid.
Well, we like Taylor. I mean, he's smooth. There's a lot of things to like. He has the NFL bloodlines. Part of me thinks, as much as I like him, this might sound contradictory to the point I just made, but part of me feels like his ceiling isn't even as high as some of the other guys we just mentioned. I just think his floor is higher. I think he's a safer, solid pick. So I just wonder, like me, I could see Helm going both ways. I could see him not working out. I could see him being better potentially. The thing about Helm, which makes me interested for not only Drake May, but for Josh McDaniels' offense, is for May, because he can throw over the middle really well, which is pretty abnormal for young quarterbacks. But for McDaniel's system specifically, the reason that Helm is kind of intriguing is because he eats zone coverage. Yes. So, and Josh McDaniels, we watched. I'm not sitting here saying Drake May and Julian Edelman are the reincarnated, or I'm sorry, Tom Brady and Julian Edelman is not Drake May and Gunnar Helm. I'm just saying that typically in the offense,
well, I think
just like to go ahead and attack those kind of soft spots, and that's what he does well.
Yeah, I think Helm is a guy that would be ready to figure into the passing game on day one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just think he has the receiving chops. And I think, like you said, I think eventually he might be the better overall tight end. But I just like the way Taylor would figure in to the passing game.
To me, the other funny thing too is that I could see Helm. I could absolutely envision a scenario where Twitter is a buzzing about OTAs and training camp because I could see Helm just dominating in shorts and t-shirts. Now, again, whether that translates 100% is to be determined. And but I feel good about the prospects in this offense. I could see Phil Perry and Tom Curran talking about how Helm just dominated. You know, he was eating these linebackers in coverage or whatever. I could see it happening, but you know, I guess we'll see. Is there anybody, if you know, no pressure if not, is there anybody kind of later in the draft that you kind of liked, or did we mention?
Well, you know, I like Alabama. I watch all their games.
Sure.
Now their guy, I would think would be a late round guy. CJ
Okay.
I think it's Dupre, and you know, he's good size. He's like 6'5", 265. He's more of an inline blocker,
Mhm.
but you know, playing for Alabama, he knows how to get open and catch the football. But he's not a dynamic, you know, pass receiver. But you know, if you're looking for a developmental guy, I think he would be a guy that if you know he's still hanging around late in the draft, and then they just look at, hey, you know what? I think we can work with this guy. You know,
Right.
so
Yeah, no, he's someone who kind of crossed my mind too. I don't have anybody really off the top for the end. I watched a little bit of Bartholomew from Pittsburgh.
mhm.
I watched a little bit of him. He was okay. The kid from Clemson, Running Stool, I wasn't a big fan. Dupre, I watched. I didn't mind him. Thomas Gordon from Northwestern was a little interesting. No one really jumped off. I think the sweet spot for tight end to me, Steve, was really that late second, early fifth round kind of sweet spot to me. I feel like you can get a good player there. And I think that they're going to be in control, you know, of if they want to go that route or not. I also don't know what they think of Bell, because for all I know, he could be off the
Right.
team in a couple months. I don't know. I mean, maybe he made the jump. I could see it going both ways. I mean, you know, when Vrabel was coaching Tennessee, I mean, they had what? Not Delaney Walker. Who am I thinking of? Why am I blanking? The tight end the Patriots signed with Hunter Henry a couple of years ago, who came over from the Titans.
Oh,
Why am I blanking? He went to the Dolphins. I don't know
yeah,
why I'm blanking
yeah.
on the name. That's hilarious.
Oh,
Everyone
I
listening to
just
this
had his
podcast,
name on the
everyone
tip.
listening to this podcast right now is screaming at me like this is so obvious. I literally just had a total brain fart. That's so
Yeah, he had a great year last year too.
No, I know. I don't know. It's gonna come back to me. It's gonna drive me freaking bananas. So if everyone wants to yell at me in the comments, then go fucking nuts.
Yeah.
But but for some reason, I literally pictured it, and it just literally left me. Anyways,
Yeah.
so I'll be curious to see what they end up doing with that. Obviously, offensive line is going to be interesting. There's a lot of different positions to go. We're going to talk about tackles and work our way in. So let's take a break for podcast purposes. And when we get back, we'll dive into the tackles and the possibilities number 4 for the Patriots. All right, we're back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Derek Haven, Steve Balistrieri. Please do subscribe to us on our Patriots 4th and 2 YouTube channel. If you could like, share, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. It keeps us high in those rankings so the Patriots fans can find us. Steve, as I sit here and jog my memory again for who the hell I'm thinking of. Johnny Smith. Thank you. God, that was going to piss me off. Again, people can yell at me. That's fine. I more than deserve it. I brought it up, and then the name literally lost me. I could picture it. I just couldn't say it. Oh, my gosh. That's so funny.
And then as soon as you said, I just lost his name, I was like, I had his name on the tip of my tongue.
You could see it. You just couldn't say it.
Yeah.
That's funny. So, look, off the line, obviously, a little bit of a long-winded conversation for the Patriots. They signed Garrett Bradbury, the center. We haven't even talked since the whole David Andrews thing. We're going to get that tomorrow on Wednesday, so I want to save that more for Wednesday, okay? But they have a starting caliber center. They have a solid right guard, Mike Onwenu, his natural position, the position they really want. I mean, Elliott Wolf flat out said that at the combine. Right tackle, they obviously put in some money to Morgan Moses. I mean, let's be honest, it was a 3-year deal, but it really was a 2-year contract. I mean, he's here for 2 years, and I think he's probably done right after that. Maybe you squeak a third out of him, but he's already kind of on that back nine anyway. So now you're looking at the left guard, left tackle. We know about the Will Campbell conversation. David Andrews said on social, we talked about this. He would take Campbell. Dante Scarnecchia has said that he would take Campbell. I personally would. If they feel like he can play the position, I don't really care about the arm length. I'm not discrediting the theory. Mel Kiper's been big on this. He's been big on this for decades. For him, it's tackles, it's edge rushers, it's receivers, it's corners. When you play on the boundary, your arm length matters with leverage. And I guess for me, Steve, it's hard to really know from a personality standpoint. And I'm saying that from only kind of seeing it through only seeing that through interviews on TV. He comes off like a Mike Vrabel guy. Like I can see this being a kind of guy that Mike would just fall in love with. So I want to get your take on Campbell, but let me ask you this. And I guess you can do it in reverse order. If Campbell was a guard, would you still take him at 4?
Or if they look at him as a guard.
If they look at him as a tackle, but he ends up falling short of a guard, I guess you could look at it both ways. If he's only a guard in their mind, does that change it? I guess let's do it that way. If he's only a guard in their mind, would you do it? Or would you at least roll the dice if they think he can play tackle, but the fail safe or the floor would be him going to guard? And just being a guard?
Look, if you feel he can play tackle, and then you take him, right?
Sure.
If you feel that he's strictly a guard, I wouldn't take him at 4.
Yep.
Because you have some guys that could maybe fill in as your left guard. You don't know what you have with those guys yet. I would still draft a guard, but I wouldn't do it with number 4. And I think they feel like he can play tackle. I do, because they still listen to Dante Scarnecchia inside those walls.
Oh, sure.
And Dante knows, Dante knows talent. The guy they have there now knows talent and knows how to coach those guys, and that's Doug Marrone. So I would imagine when it comes to, Will Campbell, I think nobody's getting listened to more than Doug Marrone right now, because, he's one of the best offensive line coaches, if not the best, in the NFL. And he's really good at that. And so, in regards to Campbell, I know length does matter, but you watch the tape of this guy, and he's going against the SEC pass rushers since he's a freshman,
which was
he's been
loaded.
Starting since a freshman.
Yep.
And he's only given up 5 sacks in 3 years.
Yep.
And you can say what you want about measurables, but the tape don't lie.
Campbell reminds me a lot of Taylor Lewan. I know they're different body types, but I just mean from like a mean streak, from a personality. That's why I can see the Mike Vrabel connection to him, because I could see that he wants a guy that he wants to be able to go to war with, and I think that Campbell's one of those guys. I just think that's how he comes across. So to me personally, if I got their honest assessment, they being the Patriots, if I got the Patriots' honest assessment and they said he's going to be a guard, I wouldn't take him at 4. I don't care how good he is. I just think that there's other hard positions. And let's be honest, I know they're different regimes, but they've taken a lot of freaking guards in the last couple of rounds. They need to hit on one of those. One of these guys needs to work out. Cole Strange, they experimented at center a little bit, but they want him to play guard. City So's there, and Tony Maffey. I don't care who it is. It's friggin' Layden Robinson. They're gonna have to find somebody to play there. At the same time, as much as I want to say that, if I want to play devil's advocate to my own argument, I would say that there were rumors about them being interested in multiple guards in free agency at that left side. The guy from Baltimore, last name starts with an M. I'm blanking on his name too. The Freeze kid who went to Indianapolis, or from Indianapolis. This is a horrible podcast because I'm just not remembering names at all. But I guess my point is they've shown big money interest in some of these guys, and they didn't land it. But their point was that they were looking. So my thought is, do they not feel good about that? How do they view someone like Jake Andrews? Do they view he was only a fourth round pick? Do they view him as a center or a guard? I don't know. I don't know that answer. So, and then obviously new regime, new coaching staff. What do they want to do? What fits? What doesn't? So I guess that's one of those things. As far as tackle goes, there's Armand Membu we can talk about. Is there somebody is there anybody that you want to kind of throw out there as someone that you like, whether it's at 4 or if they trade down a little bit, Steve?
Well, see, one of the things I've been writing about recently a lot is what I would like to see them do. And we don't know if this guy even still wants to play or not right now. And that would be Tryon Smith.
Yeah, Tryon Smith, yeah.
And, you sign him as a stopgap measure, right? And this is your insurance, because you sign a guy like him for a 1-year deal. He can still play. Now, he's obviously far from the guy that was in Dallas for all those years.
I mean, yeah, he was a Hall of Fame player for 10 years.
Yeah, and he's gonna end up in Canton, but he's not that guy.
As he should.
But he still can play. And his technical skills are still there.
But he's probably going to miss a couple games too. So what do you do about that? If he only plays 10 out of 17 games, what do you do with the other 7?
Right. Well, you still need to, even if you sign him, you still need to draft a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so my thought process was, what if you bring in Smith and then take a flyer on Josh Simmons? Because I thought he was going to be the number 1 tackle in the draft until he got hurt.
Well, let me ask you this, though. So let me interject with this because this is going down an interesting road because I've heard this on a couple different podcasts, and I want your honest opinion. I'm not going to name names because if they're not live on here, it feels like a misrepresentation of the point. And again, this isn't even an attacking thing. I just heard a conversation on a Patriots podcast saying that the Patriots can't take Josh Simmons because he essentially is going to have to redshirt his rookie year. I would say I strongly disagree. If you're saying that Josh Simmons, who, to your point, was the number 1 projected tackle before the year started, okay, he's going to have to go ahead and recover for a year. So he's going to miss almost the entire year. Let's say it's the entire season. Well, if you're telling me that you could trade back up, if you think he's a good player, then trade back up and go get him. I don't think anyone's under the illusion that they're contending this season. You just need to you just need to pick the best player.
And that's why I'm thinking, in the long run, he's probably going to be the best tackle out of this draft.
I mean, he's the prototypical size. So if you want to tell me that they take Travis Hunter at 4, and then they move up from 38 and they take, what is it, 38, 69, 77? Is that what it is?
Something
I want to say.
That, yeah.
Okay, so who cares? Let's just say they move up from 38 and they take one of their thirds and they move up to 28. Like they move 10 spots and they take Simmons, but he can't play the entire year. But you come away with a potential franchise left tackle at 28, 1 year away. And maybe a guy like Travis Hunter, you're not telling me that you're walking away not doing cartwheels? I would.
Well, see, I would trade up. I mean, I had this conversation with Mike DeBate last week.
I feel like you're cheating on me with Mike. It's a little unfortunate. I need to get Mike back on here.
Yeah. And a good trade up would be with Minnesota at 24. They only have 4 draft picks this year.
Yeah, that's what you and I were talking about because that was Phil Perry's whole idea. He was basically saying,
and I think that's that's an intriguing idea because, you're asking them to slide back a little, but they're picking up some extra draft picks.
But they have 4 draft picks to your point because of the J.J. McCarthy thing. And then Phil Perry's point, which is when you and I talked about this the other day, Phil Perry's point was you would jump 25, which is the Houston Texans, who just traded Laramie Tunsil. And Nick Caserio knows that front office more than anybody. So you got to skip Nick Caserio, the Texans, give the Vikings more ammo, and get back into that round. If you're telling me you get Josh Connerly or Josh Simmons, I'll take it. I'll take either one. They're different players for different reasons. But,
Right.
I mean, let's not forget, who's I've said this for a while now. It's not a trick question. If you don't know it, it's no big deal. Who's the best player in the draft, in my opinion? Abdul Carter.
Abdul Carter, yeah.
And Josh Connerly, when he faced Abdul Carter, zero pressures. I'm not saying that's just the one thing. I'm just using it as a measuring stick for someone who I think is the best player in the draft. Cardinals only 21. So there's a lot to like there too. And I think Simmons, like you said, more polished. I mean, he's a big dude. You're not having these size questions about him. But to me, tackle's probably the way to go. But it's like, can you look at something later? If they were to go ahead and take somebody in the second round, Steve, is there somebody that you have an eye on?
Excuse me. It would be Connolly from Oregon.
Okay.
Or Wyatt Millum from West Virginia.
So yeah, Millum is a name I've heard more and more of recently. Ariante Ursary to me from Minnesota is one of the ones that's a little bit more intriguing. A little over 6'6", 330 pounds, really big dude. The only big deal with Ursary is because a lot of people think he's a right tackle.
I didn't know how to pronounce his name.
Ariante Ursary, that's all right. Yeah. I think that, Belton, Millum, Jalen Travis, I do. There's a lot of guys that I kind of like, but to me, I think that sweet spot for tackle is going to be if they're not taking it first pick, I think it's going to be their second pick, or I think they're just going to skip it altogether.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my guess. So, I guess let's say that they have the left guard somewhere on their roster right now, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Would you prefer they take a left, like if they were to take Simmons, someone who you really like? Let me use this as an example. If they were to take Simmons, would you prefer they trade up for him? Would you trade back? Like, how would you approach that whole thing? You wouldn't take him at 4, would you, given the injury?
No, not with the injury. No, I would trade back into the first round for him. I would take somebody else at 4 and then try to trade back in. I think that would be the way to go with him. So say, for instance, either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter is still on the board at number 4. You're going to jump on one of those guys, right?
Right.
And then you're going to take him and then try to trade back into the first round, because I think, anywhere 20 to 26, maybe you might be able to get, the kid from Ohio State. And, it's a crapshoot because you don't know. But, I think if they trade back in, that would where I'd want to get him. I wouldn't want to trade back into the first round. I think that's really risking it.
What if somebody traded up and you traded back from 4 to, say, somewhere in the 8 to 10 range?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a trick question. I'm just kind of speaking out loud. Like, would you feel better about that then, or would it depend on the package you're receiving? Because I know we're dealing with a lot of hypotheticals, so I don't want to give everybody an ice cream headache.
So
but
you're asking me what?
So I'm like, let's say, like, for example, let's say the Bears wanted to get Ashton Genty to pair in that offense with Cliff Kingsbury and Caleb Williams and everybody. Not Cliff Kingsbury, Ben Johnson and Caleb, and they want to get him up there. And you trade from 4 to 10, and you get next year's. You go from 4 to 10. And you get their 2 this year. I don't know. I don't even know what the numbers are. I'm totally hypothetical.
Okay.
So So you have 2 seconds, 2/3, and you pick 10. Would you feel better about Josh Simmons then, or is that still a little too rich because of the knee? To me, that still scares me a little bit because I do feel like you need a contributor.
Because
but I think it makes it a little bit more palatable.
At 10. then I'd be looking at a wide receiver.
Right.
One of the two guys from Texas, right?
But like, see, here's the thing. Like, if I want to go ahead and throw another hypothetical out, and this will be the last one because it will get too confusing otherwise. But like, the Steelers aren't usually this kind of franchise. But let's say that Cam Ward is the only quarterback that goes in the top 3. So Shador's there, and at 4. If the Steelers were to go from 21 to 4, I don't even know what the package would be. And again, this isn't really their style. I'm just, again, kind of using it. If you get some huge package to go from back from 4 to 21, I could stomach taking Josh Simmons then. Because I'm like, he's not going to play right there, but right in the 20s, that's the sweet spot. You get a ton of picks. You can potentially get your franchise tackle. Okay, but to me, if I'm sticking at 4, or even if I'm in the top 6 or 7, just stay relatively in that range.
Mm-hmm.
I need to get a Travis Hunter. I need to get an Abdul Carter. I need to get a Will Campbell. I need someone who I can plug and play, because they signed, in my opinion, and your opinion, they've signed 4 guys or so, give or take, multiple starters in free agency. They need another starter. They need to flip this roster continuously. So I think that you have to get a player who's actually going to be able to start from day one, where you can say, week 1, Will Campbell, left tackle, here we go.
Yeah. It would be either like in that scenario that you talk, like 6 to 8 range.
Yep.
Then it would have to be either Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks at that spot.
Well, so here's the thing. I mean, you talk about, you got the Jaguars, at 5. They have Lawrence, obviously. Geno Smith went to the Raiders, and so they're probably not taking a quarterback at 6. I don't think you're going to trade with the Jets. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm just saying I don't think it will happen. And they just signed Justin Fields, but I just don't really see them kind of moving up as much as they're an issue. The Panthers, Bryce Young, which I'm honestly happy for him. I didn't even like him as a prospect coming out that much, but I am happy for him as a story to kind of go ahead and feel like he had some kind of a revival towards the end there. But they're not taking one. Are the Saints? And then you're going down to 9. So, like, okay, we can have that conversation then, but it doesn't. It's not even like it's a weird draft, Steve, because it's not even like there's like these locked barrel like prospects that are just perfect fits. Not a great quarterback draft. It doesn't really matter what you do. You could trade down 5 spots. I think you're in the same spot that you are at 4. So again, it goes back to what we started the conversation is. You just have to get a guy that can play. Like, that's all that really matters.
Yeah. And again, I mean, you drop back into that 6 to 8 range. If you're looking for a tackle at that spot, it would have to be either Campbell or Banks, or that's where you try to snag one of the top wide receivers. At that point, but and then try to obviously trade back into the first. That's where I'd get,
So to me,
Simmons.
so to me, we can move on after this, but to me, the sweet spot is that mid-20s. Because
and again, like you said at the outset of the show, I mean, there's only a few real blue chip guys, and then anywhere between 5 and 20, you're basically, all these guys are in the same boat. There's no one that really stands out or, whatever. It's just like, all of these guys are, you can make a point. Hey, this guy could be at 5 or this guy could be at 20, anywhere in between. And you can make a case for that. And, no, it'd be interesting because again, I mean, I would love to be a fly on the wall. To see how they feel about these tackles. But how we normally do this. If you're looking like, say, in the 3rd round for a tackle, Ozzie Trapillo from BC. Yep. Another intriguing guy, I think, in like maybe the 4th or 5th round, if you're looking for another tackle, he's a massive dude. Holland Pierce out of Rutgers.
Yeah.
That used to be the Patriots' like go-to place, right?
Sure.
And the guy's 6'8", 345 pounds.
Yeah, he's a moose. He's the side of a barn.
Yes. And he has, he has upside that you could develop. I don't think he'd be a day one starter or anything like that. He may never be a starter, but if you're looking for a guy in the middle rounds that you can develop and maybe make a swing tackle out of, boy, he's a big dude.
No, that's a great name to pull from. I mean, honestly, I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated with how they go, kind of go about it. Because if we are talking the same names that we were talking in the first round, I I really think you need to jump Kansas City and the Eagles, who were in that when the Patriots were really doing well, that these were the kind of teams that could take a little bit of rolls of the dice and they could go ahead and leapfrog those guys. I think you are looking at potential projects. To me, if they take somebody in the second or third or fourth round or whatever a little bit later, I think that you're looking at somebody who's a potential Morgan Moses replacement at right tackle, but that doesn't solve your left tackle need. To me, and I know we've talked about this at least offline, I still have some hope for Caden Wallace. I know maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but this was a guy who came from a good program, who was a third round draft pick. Now he's got a really good veteran in front of him. There's no pressure on him. Doug Marone's here. Everyone raves about him. If they can go ahead and give him a year or two to go ahead and season a little bit, maybe he's your replacement at right tackle in a couple of years. But you still got to worry about that left side. And I'm not even sure if the Patriots are done there. I just have a hard time believing. So far, I know it's hard because we're coming from like the Bill Belichick school of deception. Elliott Wolf and Mike Vrabel have pretty much done exactly what they said they were going to do from the moment they took over.
Yep.
So part of me wonders if they're just going to be like, yeah, we're taking an offensive line first, because Mike Vrabel has done that in the past. He believes in the trenches. He wants to be tough, smart, physical. So to me, he's going to take the tough, smart, physical guy in Will Campbell. And Elliott Wolf comes from Ron Wolf,
Green Bay,
who took offense, who believed in offensive and defensive linemen, skill positions on day two, and taking a quarterback every year or every other year to go ahead and draft and develop those guys. That was their philosophy that he basically has done. So part of me is like, maybe you're overthinking it a little bit. And I say we, I mean me, really. But maybe I'm overthinking it, maybe not. But to me, I have a hard time believing, again, I could see different things, but I just wonder if that's going to be the case. If we go interior, Steve, left guard, again, definitely unsure. Right guard's not going anywhere. Center's really not going anywhere, at least for this year, I don't think. Although I wouldn't say Bradbury's deal makes him uncuttable. I just think it would be unlikely. Do you see a scenario where they go interior offensive line at any point, at least on the earlier side? Maybe not later, but on the earlier side of that draft.
I wouldn't rule it out, but I would.
I'd be surprised.
Yeah, that would be the best way.
Yeah.
And the top four guys are all SEC guys, in my opinion. I mean, I think the top guard in the class is Tyler Booker from Alabama, and I think he's going to go way before the Patriots would probably think about drafting a guard.
Yep.
And then both guards from Georgia, I think, are outstanding as well. I mean,
I'm pretty much okay with taking any Georgia offensive lineman at any point, because I don't know what the hell they're feeding those guys. But I mean, Xavier Truss is 6'7", 309. I mean, he's a house too.
Yes.
So you're talking about who was the kid from last year? Was it the Steelers? Was that Amarius Mims? And then, I'm talking about both sides of the line. I mean, they've had some crazy big, linemen coming out of Georgia.
I'll tell you what, whoever is the strength and conditioning coach
needs more money
for Georgia. He should be making a ton of coin. And if I'm an NFL team, getting ready to start a new franchise, I mean, he's one of the first guys I would call, because these guys are, when they come out of that program, they're enormous and they run like scalded dogs. I mean,
yeah.
They're so athletic. they do such a great job down there. I mean, the two guards from Georgia, Tate Ratledge and Dylan Fairchild. I mean, actually, with Booker, the three of those guys, I think, you could make the argument for either one of those three, or any of those three, I should say, to be the top guard in the class. And I think all three of those guys, they'll probably go a little earlier than the Patriots would want to pick. But if you're telling me they, decided they wanted to take one earlier rather than later, and you mentioned any of those three guys, sign me up.
I think that there's one element of this entire conversation that we haven't even mentioned, which I think is worth at least noting. We also don't know if there's somebody that's going to shake free, whether there's another team that has a veteran on the roster, which maybe they're thinking about moving a different direction. They land a tackle, someone comes open later in the summer. I don't think it's like this. Like everyone has this opinion of like, oh, you have this 48 to 96-hour window where free agency is crazy, and then it's just like everything stops and the team can no longer improve. I don't believe that. I don't subscribe to that on any level. And I think that there's a point that I still think that after the draft next month, the team, I think that we'll see, as we typically do, teams will make their draft picks. The board will fall a certain way, and then they'll probably there'll be veterans released that people weren't expecting because the board fell a certain way, and maybe they were drafted. Maybe, and there's usually scuttlebutt, about teams being able to find or hear things about certain guys come available. I don't think that's a possibility. I think the interior offensive line, I'd be pretty surprised if it was anything early, but I think tackle's absolutely on the radar. I just don't see how it's not. I really don't. And I also don't know what Doug Marrone, I don't know how he feels too. I mean, maybe his blocking style or whatever behind closed doors is not on the same page as what they have already in house. I just have a hard time believing it's going to be an IOL, Steve. Just given all the assets, I don't care if it's the previous regimes. I just have a hard time just given the bodies that they're going to go interior. I just think it's going to be offensive line. It's going to be a tackle.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm just, I was looking at guard prospects because I'm thinking maybe round 4.
Yep.
Or below, unless somebody who's like, one of the guys I mentioned for some reason starts to drop into the, third round area like that. But other than that, I just don't see him doing that early. They've drafted so many guards lately, it seems. And like you said, one of them just has to stick,
Yep.
But I mean, is there any guard that stands out to you that you really like?
For guards, not as much. I mean, the guy I watched a lot of, and I know he played tackle in college, and now he's looking like he's going to be a center. But Gray Zabel's getting a lot of steam.
Yes.
He's been getting a lot of traction, and he's coming from North Dakota State University, and really interesting player. Watched him, ton of versatility, makes a lot of sense. I watched a bit of Seth McLaughlin from OSU. I thought he was kind of interesting. Again, interior, exterior. But the guy that really caught my eye the most was Jared Wilson. And again, another Georgia guy, also some flexibility. I wonder, I go back and forth on the whole center thing because part of me looks at it and says, okay, if they're going to take a third or fourth round pick, they probably need some kind of flexibility on it, but maybe they go ahead and try to take somebody who can eventually place Bradbury. And I don't even want to call him a lock because they didn't really give him that much money guaranteed. So I just think it was one of those things where they just felt like they needed to move on for David for whatever reason. We can talk about that more on Wednesday. For whatever reason, they felt like they needed to. But is this a solution for more than a year? I don't know. So I think left guard, they'll find somebody on the roster. But I think if they don't take a tackle early, they're going to take a developmental tackle late, or they're going to take a center. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And
anybody else that you want to mention?
There's, and I'll butcher this guy's name. the kid from Arizona, Jonah Savianea. Is that how you
Yeah,
say his
well,
name?
so he was interesting because, and I'm only cutting you off because
Because I
lost
think
him.
he's going to be a guard in the NFL.
He was just like
I think
I'm gonna butcher the guy who came out last year who was a tackle who went to guard from them. I can look it up in a second here. But I think he's gonna move interior, which is why I didn't really count him. So
right, but I think he's a guy that would probably be a good NFL guard.
Sure.
He played tackle at Arizona, but I think he'll move inside. He's got the size.
It's something Jordan.
He's also
I am horrible.
that Polynesian Samoan type of body build.
And they love him down there.
Yeah, and those guys.
It's Jordan Morgan. That's who it is. Yeah, so he was there, and they were a pretty good tandem together. But Morgan moved inside. I want to say he went to Green Bay, if I'm not mistaken. Jordan Morgan. But he moved inside too. So I think it's a similar route there, but I don't see him as a true tackle prospect. To me, I want to take someone, if I'm the Patriots, I want to take someone who I feel like could be a polished interior guy or an exterior guy who, if they don't take one early, someone who they can kind of build with and kind of move forward like that.
I agree.
Any final thoughts, Steve, as we wrap up today's show?
No, I mean, this was fun. I mean, because again, there's
aside from us butchering every name in the book and not remembering anybody's names, we did pretty good.
And forgetting about Jonnu Smith.
Sure.
But when you're looking at offensive line prospects, there's so many different guys out there, and so many different builds. And when the rubber hits the road, I go back. Dante Scarnecchia, David Andrews, all say that they would go with Will Campbell, and if they're going to take an offensive lineman at number 4, then.
To me, it's Campbell all day long. I
still trust Dante.
But I think we are on the same opinion, though. I still think that as much as I like Will Campbell, and we can have that conversation I'll have that conversation with anybody. I don't really understand the whole Will Campbell negative stuff. I see a lot of it online. Maybe it's just Twitter because it's a cesspool and whatever. But to me, I still think he's a good player, and I think he fits the kind of identity that they want to form. But I still think the best avenue would be Carter or Hunter falling into your lap at 4 and then trading back in for Connerly or Simmons in the 20s.
You didn't tell me that the light in my office here making me look blonde.
You do look gray.
Yeah, check that out, man.
That's no filter for you.
Yeah, I haven't had blonde hair since I was like 4 years old.
Oh yeah, it's been a while. Back in the 1930s. Oh man. Well, we will do. So we're recording this Monday, March 24th, and I'm sure this will be posted tomorrow and Tuesday. Wednesday, we're going to do our show. We'll just kind of do an around the horn style, just different Patriots topics, catch up. And then next week, Steve, we're going to dive into the front 7, which I know is really exciting. And just as today was, there's a whole lot of guys to talk about. Let's hope we can actually remember those names, because that would make it a lot better show. So
this is what happens when we do it at night. So
that's a good point. Which is why I'm drinking 200 milligrams of caffeine at 6 o'clock.
I filled up my water and I haven't taken a sip.
Well, I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. For Steve Ballsjerry, I'm Derek Havens. Please do subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, or like, share, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Wherever you listen to podcasts, it keeps us high on those rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. Be sure to check out patsfans.com for a great bout of content, and we will see you guys in a couple of days. Talk to you then.
That's right. And as Mike Diabate, he ends his podcast, we'll see you again on Patriots 4th and 2.